everyone, Chanel here from the Shubert organization. I'm back with a very special episode of the Shubert Advocacy series. This time we are in person with some up-and-coming producers you need to keep your eyes on. I am joined today by Bryan Joseph Lee, Sammy Lopez, Victoria DETRES, Danny MARIN, and Lauren Lacroix. Everyone, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So, there has been a reckoning on Broadway, and not just as far as racial justice is concerned, but many inequalities, both in regards to sexuality, identity. People and organizations have been very vocal about the change they're willing to make. As far as you are concerned, do you think organizations have been making those changes, or do you think we're still in the same place we were 2 years ago?
I feel like organizations have started to implement some change, but there's never going to be actual change unless the individuals within that organization come forward and make those changes, is how I feel about it. So there's been a lot of talk about all of this change and how we're going to improve work environments for ourselves, and yet we are seeing other institutions constantly doing stuff to create unsafe environments for us. And, you know, I have a lot of hope that we can get there, but until those individuals can actually implement that change themselves, within themselves, to learn, to listen, to hear, nothing's gonna change.
Yeah, I think we're getting there, but I think it's easier to stand behind a blanket statement, which we see a lot of. And I think it's easier to get the work done in theory, and the practice is lacking. I think we're also having a reckoning of how we pay our artists. And you see some institutions talking about fair compensation, but then you still see a lot of job listings that are not offering what these artists are meant to be getting. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I think it's easier to make a statement without actually following through with those statements.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I'm having difficulty with the language of reckoning, right? That actually these conversations have been happening for quite some time, and there's an entire history of resistance and struggle and organizing within the arts, from the Black arts movement to the Chicano arts movement to the queer arts movement. That history is available to us if we choose to accept it, right? So in many ways, I think that conversations may seem new, but particularly for those of us who have been marginalized and disenfranchised, we've been saying the same thing for a long time. What is different for me right now is language, is the idea that we have a common vocabulary, we have a shared set of principles and understandings that we can begin to move with. We may not always agree, but at least if we're moving in alignment, we can further the conversation, which I think is incredibly important.
Yeah, I really want to uplift Bryan here, because for me, a lot of my personal learning and unlearning throughout the last 2 years has been educating myself on the organizations that have been doing this work for years, for decades, and allowing yourself to take in the legacy and pick up where they have been doing that heavy lifting for however long the organizations have been around. I think, you know, specifically in nonprofit institutions, these statements of accountability, it's exciting to see, but what I'm more excited to see is the follow through, and is the idea of now accountability is out on the table. We're showing our cards, and how do we open the space to allow that change to happen, and understanding that budgets are tight, that understanding that you know, programming is backlogged. But Rome wasn't built in a day. If you're showing us the transparency and the steps that you're guiding to a pathway towards true equitable practices, towards a true open and, you know, I would say actually addressing the calls to action that most BIPOC artists are calling for, I think that's what we're asking for. We don't want to feel like we are waiting for the people at the top of Mount Olympus to grant us our wishes. we want to know, we want to be in conversation.
There's wonderful things that have been put out there. There's wonderful flags that are being flown right now. But it's the follow through, and it's the intent to actually follow through. So it's like when you put it out there, you have to know that there will be problems that pop up later on that you also have to address. And it's not like making a sandwich. It's not going to be done. You know what I mean? It's going to be something that goes on for the rest of your life and for the rest of the entity's life. Do you know what I mean? Just as it is being a person of color walking through the world, you find that out. You know what I mean? So the organizations have to do the exact same thing.
Right now, there are several plays on and off Broadway by Black playwrights. Are you concerned that this is just the flavor of the month, and so that people can pat themselves on the back and say, good job, racism in our industry is over? And if so, how do we keep people accountable that this is not just a quick fix and this isn't something that should just end because people feel like they've done enough?
Well, let's be real, tokenism didn't start yesterday, right? This idea that you can symbolize change is a tale as old as time. But what we know to be true is that representative politic doesn't actually change the system, right? Like electing one person of color, or programming one play by a community of color, or producing, one Black play doesn't in and of itself shift the system, right? So there's something that we have to focus on beneath the representation, which is how are we providing opportunity in a sustainable way? How are we making sure that everyone from producers to the artists that we support, to the communities that we uplift, feel seen and heard and recognized and have access to resource? Ultimately, when we begin to build those spaces, we can shift how the industry moves brick by brick, right? But I don't think that, resting on just seeing an image of a person of color on stage is substantial enough for where we are in 2021.
I think much to what Bryan said, I want to uplift you in that regard as well, because I thought that it was really important. I think that they're beyond what it is that we're talking about on the macro of it, of having Black playwrights being in these Broadway houses and having that representation and that visibility. We also have to remember that the only way that this is going to be substantial change is if we have it be the front of house, backstage, every designer. We need to start implementing actual opportunities for these artists. Right. So it's going to become the flavor of the month if producers aren't looking at the bigger picture of it all. We don't look at every single individual that is a part of the development and the creation of this. If there weren't shows that were out right now written by Black playwrights, and not those playwrights and directors not giving opportunities to their communities, we are hurting our communities because we are only doing the face value of it all. There's no actual implementation of change. So I think that we have to seek that and hold each other accountable.
I feel like I'm just going to talk about intent today. That's like what's on my heart. But there's flavor of the month and tokenism are the same thing. And if you're putting up the show as the flavor of the month, as that token piece, as that we did it moment, it will always be that all the time. It will just be a 360 circle until someone says, this is what it is, and this is how we have to fix it, until that someone looks like one of us. That's the real problem. Because if you don't know it's tokenism, and if you're only liking strawberry ice cream, you will always do that. Do you know what I mean? That it's my fear about what's happening right now is hopefully there will not be less of this opportunity that's given because of what's happened in the world. My fear about putting up the Black plays with the Black people, telling the ethnic stories right now is ill intent. And that's where my mind goes, okay, Lauren, how do you give yourself that opportunity to be that person that says, no, that ain't it? That's where I am.
If you Google BIPOC commercial producers, specifically on and off Broadway, it's the same list over and over again. I have a loaded question for you.
Set
Give it to
up.
us. Yeah.
Let's
Why
go.
do you think that is?
Access. I think a big part of it, I think we as individuals ourselves who are in this new world, this new change, access. That's financial, that's getting into the rooms. Those same people have spent decades, more than likely, getting into those rooms, having to fill spaces as best as they can, having to, you know, I will only speak for myself, but having to really, what is the word? Assimilate in order to be able to get into those rooms. I've had to make myself as white passing as possible. I've had to make myself sound white in order to get in those rooms so that you don't even know that I'm Latin. So how do we have more access? I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. And I think I've been thinking about this a lot because I was like, oh, I want a seat at the table. But if you're not giving me utensils to eat, I'm screwed, right?
I like that analogy.
And I feel like I've been using my hands to figure it out this entire time.
Absolutely.
She said it's easier to say that like you're welcome in the room. And I used to like, I was on this platform of like, I'm gonna get BIPOC creators in the room all the time. But if I'm not creating these rooms to be safe, I am hurting my artists.
Right.
So it's like, what level of care are we taking care of other producers? And also like what gatekeeping continues to happen. It goes beyond saying, oh, come into the room. It's like, okay, what are the next steps? What's the follow through there? Which might be like the buzzword of today, follow through.
Right. Follow through.
Yeah.
There will always be those that come before you, right? I was brought up to respect my elders. Always will. But the one thing that my elder always told me was you get yours. And when that happens, I love and respect all these people, these very, very few people, but my whole deal is about female creatives and employing females. And I don't see nobody doing that looks like me. And that's what I want. So when I look at my, my peers that are doing, the work and have done it for years, that's great. There is room for so many of us. And they have to give us the opportunity too. Do you know what I mean? Like they have to say, you is new, you is new, you is new, you is new, and you is new, and come with me, let me help you. I'm not saying that I'm not getting that. I'm just saying it is really hard if you're sitting at the table with no utensils. That's just where it is.
It's the financial structure of our business is inequitable. It's inherently inequitable. We inherited this entire structure for the last century. It's really evolved, and the idea that someone can be a stakeholder in a show, but the gate is to be an accredited investor. I think that in itself is the invitation where it stops for most BIPOC individuals, because we don't see ourselves as investors. Some of us come from backgrounds where talking about money is not necessarily the easiest conversation. And the thought of asking someone for money, asking for an investment that is minimum $25,000, that in itself is a big stop to my invitation to become a producer, to become an investor or a co-producer. And so, throughout the last 2 years, my passion has been, if we've inherited this process, why aren't we disrupting the way we bring accredited investors at the table?
Sam, actually, I wanted to ask you, you've had some experience now with working with investors and just talking about how it's, sometimes can be uncomfortable with asking for money. And what was that pathway like for you? And was there ever a point in time where it started to feel more comfortable, or, where you started to believe, I can do this?
No matter what, asking for money is the hardest part of being a producer. I think there's never a sense of making it feel.
Wow.
No matter who I'm talking to, either way, it's always uncomfortable. And I think the framing that I have learned throughout, being able to be in the room with some incredible producers and investors and mentors. You know, the biggest thing I think about is constantly staying curious within myself and constantly recognizing that I actually deserve to be in this conversation, and the story that I'm saying deserves $25,000. And so it's constantly allowing yourself to process that, allowing yourself to, you know, look at other producers whose careers that you are inspired by and taking the step to reach out to them. And I think throughout the Zoom era of the industry, we've kind of equalized some of the access to people. You know, email feels much easier these days than it did in 2019. Finding time in people's schedules, I mean, it's hard again because we've suddenly been thrown into the Wild West again of Broadway. However, like, I think that there's, you know, people that I have tried to get in the room with for years and years are now suddenly replying to emails. So I think there's a moment of just allowing yourself to figure out and navigate, like, you deserve to be in any conversation that you deserve to be in. But I do think the money aspect is always going to be, it's just always going to be a little monkey on your shoulder.
I don't know how y'all feel, but I'm gonna ask a question. How do y'all feel about being the word up-and-coming producer feel to you? Because I know it feels terrible for me. Because I've been producing for several years.
Emerging,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We're constantly emerging. I will
Yeah.
never not emerge. I'm
And
always
I
a
don't,
chrysalis.
but I don't know if I don't see that happening to our white counterparts and our white colleagues. I know people who have been producing way less longer than I have in a smaller time frame, who are getting investors, who are producing films now, who are doing so much theater. And where are the same people that I've been in the same rooms with? Where are they with the money? Where are they with the opportunities? So I ask that in all honesty, how you feel about that, because it's, you know, it's rough.
If fundraising is a game of telephone, I think the inequity is that my game is 10 times longer than someone else's, right? That's where the inequity lies. That I have to call more people, get more no's, be in more rooms in order to have the opportunity to get a yes. That doesn't mean that, you know, it's not a crapshoot whenever you're fundraising, but it absolutely does depend on the kind of access you're talking about, Danny. And yeah, there are coded ways in which that is, you know, marginalizing us further, right? That there's value in being, I'll speak for myself, there's value in being a Black producer. I think being a Black producer for me is a badge that I wear proudly because it informs every part of my practice, right? My Blackness is up, down, and through. It doesn't mean that it's exclusively for my community. There's a way that it is universal and everyone can have access to these stories, right? But my Blackness is a part of what I bring to the table. That often serves to close off opportunity, I have found, right? I want to find a way to bring more people in because, like you're talking about, it's really important that folks can begin to invest in us at the same rate that they invest in everyone else, and not just think of us as a marginalized project on the side, right? But to see us as valuable storytellers, to see our communities as valuable audiences, and to know that we have every right to be on these stages as anyone else.
I have found that a lot of times people are just assuming they have fixed DEI because they have hired one Black person, or they have put on one Black show, or, you know, promoted this one Black thing, Black, Black, Black. And I'm going to say it again, and louder for the ones in the back. DEI is not just about Black people.
Absolutely.
And so, Victoria, I know part of your mission statement is to dismantle this system that disallows marginalized community access, all the access that we're talking about. And in fact, your musical that you're working on, Recipe for a Sellout, deals with a woman in a post-feminist society. So as a producer, how are you making sure that these voices are getting uplifted? And what should other producers be doing as well?
It's understanding that we are constantly learning and unlearning the work. I know Sammy had mentioned that earlier, but it really is a process. I have to hold myself accountable as I move into rooms too, because I have blind spots And if I'm failing my artists, it's like saying, you're allowed to tell me that because I need to grow and I need to serve you ultimately. And collaboration comes with communication and trust, right? We are all coming from different places in the world, and we come to create art as a form of collaboration. So collaboration, good collaboration should enforce good communication. What does trust and communication look like, and how do those two talk to each other, right? And just making sure that, like, when I'm creating a room, that I'm not enforcing the same structures that don't allow for risk taking or safety in challenging my artists, right? Because I worry about, like, sometimes we're like, oh, let's talk about BIPOC creators and like let's talk about all of that, but then you have to talk about what's really hard and then talk about joy and how do those two talk to each other when you're creating. So it's a web that is constantly being weaved, but it's just, I think it comes down to listening and understanding that it's a process and you're not going to have the answers now.
And listening is free.
Yeah.
Whew, listening is free. Can you say that again?
Listening is free. I'm putting that on a t-shirt.
Sure is.
What I'm grateful about this group is like the information sharing is just like on the table. Like we have a text thread and like someone needs actors here, someone needs help over here. Like that's what it's about. It's you know, I think producers see themselves as their individual CEOs of their own projects. And we need to start seeing ourselves as like community, like scream it out, like share the information, share what's working in your process and what's not working in yours. And we can, you know, figure out how we really address DEI through talking and then listening.
And to say the other part of that, right? That white producers have been doing that for years. That the telephone game, the calling your friends and understanding, and the back channel and the conversations are the way that majority culture has gotten ahead for generations. So we have to tap into that power as well. We have to pick up the phone and call each other and open the door and be the door wedge and let everybody else on through. Do you know what I mean? So share opportunities to begin to disrupt in the same way that other communities have.
The competition game in the industry is so frustrating.
I was going to ask if that's part of the reason that people aren't picking up the telephones is because of this fear and like gatekeeping that
scarcity. Scarcity.
Well, it's like I want to jump back to like that whole, are we okay with the term up and coming, right? Because that's like I'm in my 30s and this has been happening for a really long time. Appreciative of what's happening now, but like there's not just one black female producer that wants to produce female work. It ain't just me, you know what I mean? There's so many other people that like are out there, and let me give you their number, but call them. Do you know what I mean? Just because you saw the playbill or you saw the blah blah blah, and like amazing that we're being, you know, propped up by this organization as thinkers. But there are others too, you know? I don't know how many people applied to this or how many people applied, and all of the fellowships that are happening, going on right now, right? Like there is an engine to search for these people, but we have to have that intent to keep them. We can't just throw them away because X, Y, and Z, you know? And it's such an interesting thing about how in our communities we can just be so cutthroat. Do you know what I mean? Of like, no, I can't see, no, this person can't be next to me, or I can, blah, blah, blah. I've never thought that, but I feel it every day, you know? And there's so much about it. Like, oh, we don't know what producers are. There's so many questions that I just want to like hop on, but I feel like I'm just going to talk about intent today because that is I've been talking myself blue in the face, just following up with what people have said. That's what it is.
If we're not using money as a guide, when do you say that you are a successful producer?
I am already a successful producer, and I will just say that. That is a fact. Because I have produced work, and the work has been seen, or has happened, or is in development, I am a successful producer.
Yes.
And the reason why I really love this cohort is because circling back on what you said, we're a community, we are colleagues. This is not a competition. And it infuriates me. Infuriates me?
Yeah.
Words. It makes me really angry when we have to fight each other for those spaces in the room. And to be like, oh, that person's there. okay, I'm less than because they're in that room or in that position. I'm in the room still with them. And that is a successful producer. I think that there are so many more things that go in it, but I am a successful producer now.
I piggyback off of Danny, absolutely. I mean, it's happening now because my mission statement is what I do. That's it. And it's you know, I tell people all the time, I'm gonna keep saying it, like, I don't just produce female stories, I do my best that everyone on that crew is. Does it happen absolutely every time? Absolutely not. You know what I mean? Because there are people that are amazing for the job that ain't a woman. But like, it's the journey and it's the actual trying to find that black female lighting designer or that like Mexican American sound designer, right? She's there. We just don't know where she is. And find her. You know, like I've been in rooms. I have a project right now where I told the director, who is a male, I said, you know what my gig is? And he goes, I know, and I found them. And I go, thank you, because you've never worked with these people before. So, you know, there's a part of it that's also like everybody works with their same people all the time. We got to change that. So to be a successful producer, mission statement is what you do. You have to practice what you preach.
I have been both an us and a them. I've been inside and outside. I've been within institution and outside of institution. I've had resource and I've not had resource, right? And I don't know what that does to my understanding of being a producer, but I actually find that my skill is living in that liminal space between art and business, between community and institution, right? And holding those two in tension and in sovereignty and having them speak to each other without one overriding the other. And it's that skill that I've learned, you know, through my career as a producer, both in the nonprofit space and now in the commercial space, that I feel is a quality that makes or breaks my process.
Well, Bryan, actually, you're not just a producer, but you're also a civic activist. And so how do you bring that into the producing space?
I appreciate that. I'll challenge that I am not necessarily, you know, I wouldn't call myself a civic activist.
Okay.
So much as I am really invested in having our work actually make a difference in the world, right? I have too much respect for civic organizers and activists to necessarily call myself one, but where I do see the value of our art is that we can move people from inspiration to action, right? So much of what I've done in my career has witnessed, you know, say these dynamic stories by communities of color or marginalized communities or difficult issues rest on the stage. And I'm really interested in saying, okay, if that's what you felt and that's what you experienced, don't let it stop there. How can we connect with the activists, organizers, and communities on the ground to follow through and make change? You know, a direct example that I'm really inspired by right now is what's happening at Second Stage with Clyde's. And that as part of Lynn Nottage's program, they are having weekly discussions with communities that are coming back from incarceration, so for the formerly incarcerated. They're having partnerships. They are, you know, bringing the art directly to the communities that the play speaks about. And they're finding many different entry points to build a robust universe around the play, right? I don't think that that solves the issue of recidivism. I don't think that solves the issue of like challenges for the formerly incarcerated, but it does do more than just putting a work on stage for the consumption of audiences who don't then have a responsibility to act, right? And in my work, I think that we can be catalysts for change. I think that we can find a way to inspire others, but we also have a direct responsibility to act. That's what drives me.
I want to hop across the pond for a second.
Hop across the pond.
Because Lauren,
that's me.
You work both in New York and over in London. Is the effort for change the same there as it is here? Is it different? How is it?
I've thought a lot about this question in particular that you're asking, because I'm not a Black British person. I'm a Black American. And I can't speak directly towards that community, but I can only observe. And observe with my friends who are absolutely killing it in the UK as being Black female producers, you know, Belle Clark and Lakeisha Ari, Angelo at Soho, I know that they feel a change happening, but it is the exact same thing that's happening here. And is it tokenism or is it going to sustain the test of time? They're both shaking hands. We're literally shaking hands mid-Atlantic on what we're doing in the arts. I will say that being an African American watching the work that's happening in the UK that is diverse and inclusive, there is more of it there because of their funding. We don't have that here. To jump back on the producer, question that you ask, and to sort of kind of, answer this question the best way I possibly can as not being a Black British person, is my job, I know, is to find and to help and to assist and to push. That's my job. And if I can find someone and say, I can give you an opportunity because I can put myself in the room and I can get this money and I'm gonna ask those hard questions to give you the opportunity to impact, I'm doing it. And so that's my love affair with being here and there, is that there's things we can learn from there and there's plays that need to be here and vice versa, because we have to start seeing ourselves internationally as ethnic people in a different way. You know what I mean? I love the UK because there's just so many things that can happen. And it's such a wonderful place to start a project, because of how the economics are. And then to move that and to keep it going and to just say that you don't get to stay on that side and we get to stay on this side. That's how I feel. I hope I answered that question.
You sure did.
I hope I answered that question.
Did.
Yeah.
Danny, you are the executive director of Con Limon Productions, a company working to make theater more equitable on both sides of the table for those who are, as we said, sitting at the table, and also the actors. As someone who's been on both sides, what can they be doing to help each other in this fight for a more equitable industry?
I've learned a lot within the pandemic. As far as being an actor goes, I've worked on a couple projects in the pandemic, actually, like filming them. And I didn't know as an actor I was allowed to say no to producers, to writers, to directors. I had no idea that that was a thing, that I also held power. I had no idea. I watched another actor on one of the projects say no. Won't say that. I won't come to work tomorrow if you want me to say that. I just won't say it. And I think that there's so much strength in that. On the flip side, then that comes the responsibility of a producer to listen to that actor and say, okay, what else can we do? How can we create a safer place so that you can say something else, or we cut this at all? It is also the responsibility of both the actor and the producer. Oh, and I love talking about this. It is our responsibility as producers to also make sure that we are holding agents, managers, casting directors, everyone in our industry, hold them accountable. And that if that actor says no, it's done. Because me as an actor in this time have been brought in by producers to come in for television or film work or theater pieces that said, you're so right for this. And then I've looked at the script and I've been very happy with it. And I'm like, this is really cool writing, until I read the breakdown, until I see the part where, because I am non-binary, there's a whole conversation about non-binary and what that means. Because I am not in any kind of physical or emotional transition within my body, I do not consider myself trans. Because I'm non-binary, casting and my representation and these producers and directors have to understand when I say no to binding my chest. No. And I should not get flack for it. Because that is your job. And so on the producing side, I worked on a production that it's that thing of what do we define, how do we define ourselves as successful producers? In this instant, because I was not holding the cards how I could as a producer, because I was literally being belittled, I could not be a successful producer because I could not hold the director and anybody else that was misogynist or giving any kind of homophobic energy or being anti-black, which I will call it out as being anti-black. I failed as a producer, and I understand that because I was not given the space for me to have safety. And, you know, I think about that all the time of how I can move forward. How can I move forward knowing that that can never happen again? Because this is a new world and we are going to make a lot of mistakes. But it takes the producer who is funding this or found funders for this, and it takes the actors. I actually believe that those are the two most important people in the actual project. They hold the most power because we can say no.
I think Danny, every time you speak about it, gets me. And that's what makes Danny incredible, because he's multifaceted in all of these people, is because we don't just produce. We didn't just come from business. We came from other parts of life that showed us that the producer can turn the head, and we wanted to be that person. And I mean, we talk about it all the time. There are some people on our list that we're like, ooh, Jesus, Lord, there's a fire. You know what I mean? But it makes us whole as a person. You know what I mean? As a person in the room making these decisions, because we know when I look at the actor that's there and they look a certain way, we need to break. Or if I go into rehearsal and I'm there every day in tech, or I'm doing this for my projects, that's not a commercially driven thing at the moment. Do you know what I mean? It's because we know, because we've been on that side, you know? We have to learn how to read people and treat people better. And that's why this group I'm so thankful for, because that's all at our core.
Yes. No is a gift. No is a gift.
No is
like
no
that
is
is, and I think if we really want to live up to the responsibility of being a producer and getting art into action, we need people to say no in order for us to have a new perspective. You know, we do have blind spots. And, you know, I think right now, like a phrase that I use from Nicole Johnson, who does the Edify workshops. It's just, we don't do that in 2021 anymore. And that, honestly, the no is so powerful. And I just think as we move forward and as we balance relationships, specifically within that agent-actor relationship and negotiations and how difficult it can become, and the game of telephone is just so real, that once that no is brought up, I think that provides clarity.
Speaking in my experience, just for me, as a biracial cis woman, I have found myself in situations where I don't speak up for something because of fear of being labeled as angry or irrational. And then conversely, and I don't know if my white counterparts feel that way, conversely then, I will have times where I am given praise or accolades and I doubt that I actually earned it. And I wonder if it's just because of the color of my skin. And so I'm interested to know if any of you have ever felt either of those.
I pride myself on my vulnerability. I'm like, that's what leads me as a producer, because if I can't tell you how I'm feeling, this is not the place for me to work. But I've had situations, because I'm such a little bitch. Sorry, I'm a little baby. When I get vulnerable, I get emotional. And again, that will work against me as a female identifying producer, because she cried. That's so sad. So I think about the times I've always walked into a room when I'm like interviewing for a job or having a mentor. I'm like, I'm gonna tell you when I'm upset. I'm gonna tell you when my mental health is not okay. Because you need to know where I'm at all the time. And if I can't have that conversation with you, again, this is not a relationship I wanna have, right? But I have seen the consequences of me speaking up. And that sucks.
Yeah.
To feel like you had a security, a safety net to voice that, but then the consequences after that said, no, you didn't. And it's hard to navigate, but I'm never gonna change. I'm gonna speak up all the fucking time because I deserve to have that space and make the space for myself. But it is very hard to kind of dismantle, like, am I worth it? Am I okay? Is this where I'm meant to be? Do I have space? And it's a constant juggle. And I don't think there's a real quick fix there, right?
This is why I love Vic. It's like we're literally in each other's lives on purpose because, like, bring it on for me.
This energy,
it's like,
hold on.
she's like, bring it on for me.
I did.
I get this stuff every single day of my life. And I think about it a lot, thank God for therapy. But I think about it a lot of creatives and friends that I have let go of my life because of certain things that were said, and your girl was still thinking about it years later. That's not okay. And I need to do that. You know what I mean? Like I know you've said it in past series like this, like, oh, you talk like you speak so white because you're articulate. It's like, girl, I am who I am, and I speak how I do because I was the black kid in suburbia. That ain't my fault. That's my dad's. You know what I mean? Like that's there's more to that, and to touch upon, do you get certain things because of just who you are and maybe you didn't earn it? That feeling is the worst of all. But it's how you change that to give yourself opportunity. That's where I am right now. And that there's a lot of things in life, and we are in these seats, and there's other things that we do, and I'm very thankful for where I am. But I think to myself, did I really earn this? All the time. I'm like, did I really do enough to be in these rooms with people? And then the other thing on my shoulder goes, shut up. Absolutely shut up. Maybe it's my grandma, God rest her soul. It's like, shut up. Like there is, if there's no one that you've seen doing it, it's just you alone in that road. And all of us are okay with that. And that's why we're here together, because we're on that road in different steps. Like Bryan's up there, Sammy's over there. We're all yelling at each other on the same road. Like, I got you. Just keep going. You know what I mean? Yeah. That it's a lonely road, and doesn't feel good all the time. And to be different in the room just because of the color of your skin, just because of how you identify, just because of like, there's got to be other people in the room that say, I got you, I see you.
It's very important for us to acknowledge that each of us individually are superstars, and together, banding together as a community, there's nothing we can't do. So we need to be allowed to do that.
Yep.
Hire everyone. That's what I've learned from this. Hire every single one of these people. I'm looking directly at the camera to you, and you,
hire
and you,
everyone.
You're gonna hire me.
Co-pros, we're ready.
Yeah.
I've never had a sense. I'm getting emotional. I've never felt a sense of community in this industry.
Yeah.
I've never. And this group right here does all of that. It unravels all of those insecurities and all of the pain that I felt in this industry, understanding that we can move this forward. You too.
Yeah.
Y'all, thank you so much for joining me today. And if you want to learn more about these producers, you can go to www.shubert.nyc to read about their bios and learn about the projects that they are working on. A special thank you to the Artistic Circle Committee, Desi Moynihan, Charles Clayton, Trevor Moffin, Tammy